Good evening, welcome to Wine Trust 100, Lawson's Dry Hills and Sauvignon Blanc Celebration Day tasting webinar. Welcome along, thank you very much for joining. We're going to go through 6 wines tonight. It's Sauvignon Blanc Day. It doesn't mean they're all Sauvignon, but the first 3 are. And then we're going to look at other different varieties, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir in a rosé form and in a red form. From the start, please, I know questions are going to come in, which are very welcome. I may not be able to answer all of them straight away, but please do send them in. And if I can't answer them all, do send them into the Wine Trust office, and then I will pick up with them and reply to you if I can't do that tonight. But thank you very much for joining. I hope above all that you enjoy tonight. My name is Nick Adams. I'm a Master of Wine, known colloquially at home by my wife as WHINE. Yes, thank you. And I've worked with Lawson's or known them for 25 years, so quite some time. I've also known and worked with Wine Trust since the beginning, with John and Anna and the team there, and they've followed Lawson's loyally from the beginning. So we thought the combination of me knowing Lawson's, their loyalty in following the brand, and being Sauvignon Blanc Day, 1st of May, it made a perfect combination to do an evening of an event like this. Now, the plan tonight is I'm going to do a little bit about Marlborough, the region that Lawson's come from and make the wines, a little bit about the Lawson's history, themselves as a company, and then most importantly, we get into the tasting of the 6 wines. So along the way, please, as things evolve, we chat about things and taste, do fire away your questions as well. So the starting point about Marlborough, hopefully you may have received or seen electronically a map. This is not going to be a geography lesson, I promise you, but there will be times I refer to regions or sub-regions and certain vineyards where, if you're interested, please do refer to the map. Now, Marlborough as a district is very interesting. It's in the northeast corner of the southern island of New Zealand. There are actually 3 islands in New Zealand. So this is another pub question for 5 points. Stewart Island's a little one at the bottom. The 2 big ones, North Island and South Island, is in the northeast corner. And to try and set the climatic scene for it, compared to us in the UK, it gets roughly about 1,000 hours more sunshine than we do through the year, and about 250 millimeters less rain. And the average temperature through the summer is roughly about 6 degrees higher than we would get here. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't roast. It's not like the Barossa Valley in Australia, which really does roast. 30, 33 is actually relatively unusual in Marlborough, but 20, 25 is a constant norm for them. In fact, the Maoris call the area the area with the hole in the clouds, because their biggest problem, if anything, through the summer is lack of rain or water. They can manage that because they irrigate the vines, but in general, it's very dry, very even climatic temperatures, so therefore, in theory and in factuality, perfect growing conditions for vines. Now, because it's not a roastingly hot area, therefore it tends to favour more white grapes than black grapes. The reason for this is that white grapes ripen quicker, earlier than black grapes. So the vast majority of grapes that are grown in the region are white. The most famous, quite rightly, is Sauvignon Blanc. It is now recognized as a benchmark style in the world for Sauvignon Blanc. It accounts for over 78% of the plantings in the region, and the production that is made is consequently about over 80%. But, and this is what I like, what we're going to do tonight, is the second most important grape is Pinot Noir, which is a black grape. And that is coming on more and more, coming through in terms of style and quality with the particular wines that they're making. But obviously, Sauvignon Blanc is the lead line. Marlborough itself as a district is by far the most important. It accounts for 68% of the production for whole of New Zealand. So it is by far the biggest region commercially for them in general. So before we taste, there's a quick bit about Lawson's. So I've known them for 25 years. It was founded by Ross and Barbara Lawson. They first planted vines in 1982, and you may have seen within the pictures that were sent up by Wine Trust a very old fuzzy black and white picture of Barbara and Ross when they did actually open it to the public, which is in 1992. But in 1982, the two of them literally planted the whole vineyard. And Barbara has still to this day tells me her back tells her with pain how much that cost her physically doing it. So for the first 10 years of their life as a company, they just grew grapes as farmers and they sold them on to other people to make wine. So they were like farmers making wheat to grow wheat to sell to a baker's. But Ross was a great pioneer in many ways, and he was thinking ahead an awful lot about things. And to try and put the context of the region back to Lawson's and Lawson's back to the region, Ross said to me that when they were planting in 1982, he reckoned they were either the fifth or sixth producer at that time in the whole region, which sounds incredible because when you go into Europe, people talk about in terms of centuries, if not 1,000 years. Here we are in 1992, and he's saying I'm the fifth or sixth producer in the Marlborough region. And in fact, if you look a little bit further back from that, the real transition in Marlborough started in 1973, where there were an odd few producers before that, but not many, virtually none. So by 1982, they were fifth or sixth producer of growing grapes. Today, as at the end of last year, there were 510 producers. So that just shows you in less than 40 years how an area has gone from almost nothing to something genuinely world famous. And I can't think of any other area in the world of wine that has gone from such a standing start to something so exponential in such a short time. So I hope that puts it into a sense of scale. So they talk about 40 years, like an Italian would talk about 400 in terms of the wine world. The first 10 years growing grapes, then Ross said, we need to make our own wine. And that, if you've got it, that fuzzy picture with the signposts, and it said, we serve food as well. It's like dramatic headline on the banner as well. And they started to make their own wine. And they led with Sauvignon Blanc because by then they realized that the region had an affinity for this particular grape variety. And the style that was being made was very individual. There was a famous wine writer who I know very well, and a great regard for Oz Clarke. He was one of the earliest people that went to this area and recognized the potential for it and the style of the wine. So obviously they lent more and more towards Sauvignon Blanc. Now the irony of this is Ross's two most favorite grapes were actually Chardonnay and Gewürztraminer. So he enjoyed Sauvignon, but if he had a choice, he would have gone for the other two. But commercially, it became very, very important for them. And like a lot of others by then, exponentially, it was growing and developing very much. So by the 90s, late 90s, they were zooming along, beginning to produce a lot of wine, started to by then think about exporting beyond just cellar door sales and domestic sales. Now, he then also became a pioneer along with Barbara. He said to me that he always felt, to quote Ross, that they were at the arse end of receiving some of the crappiest corks on the planet. By that, the cork obviously that goes on the top of the bottle to seal it all up. And he found that they were getting a lot of problems with cork taint, which you can get. It's the corkiness. It just nothing. It just spoils the smell and flavor of the wine. And he felt because they were at the end of the world that they got the worst corks. So he became paradoxically a pioneer for screw caps, which now we take as for granted with wines and in many wines now. And by the 2002 vintage, Ross had decided that everything that they made would, as a result, be bottled under screw cap. And Lawson's in that year became the first winery in the world to bottle everything totally under screw cap. And that now sounds like a throwaway comment, but at the time it was actually quite revolutionary. And there was another picture which was sent out by Wine Trust, which may have, which shows them having a ceremony. Now, Ross was not short of a sarcastic sense of humor, and they had a burial of the cork in the Blenheim graveyard. And there's a nice picture there. That is the priest at the back, where they put the cork in a little coffin, and they carried it as pallbearers. and they buried the cork. It's still there in Blenheim Cemetery as a memorial to the cork as they moved over to screw caps. And that was typical of Ross and his sense of theatre as well. And also, just a little aside, here's another 5-point pub question. Blenheim is the centre, commercial centre, biggest town, or a bit large, small town in the area, population about 27,000. And it has an entry in Guinness Book of Records as being the largest urban conurbation that doesn't have a single traffic light. So there you are. I know this is popular at the moment, so, pub quizzes, so just to let you know that as an extra thrown in. Right, so I think we're getting towards a chance to do some tasting. It's his Sauvignon Blanc Day, and there are 3 Sauvignon Blancs coming up. And one of the things I find in the trade, which I find is slightly blasé, and this is very much me aimed at the trade, buyers, all Sauvignon Blancs are the same from New Zealand to Marlborough. They are not, and I hope we thought, because it's Sauvignon Blanc Day, we would try 3. They make 3 different Sauvignon Blancs. So what I thought we would do is kick off with these 3 as it's Sauvignon Blanc Day, and I explain more, and I hope, as you taste them, that you do see that it's just one producer, but they taste different, let alone a different producer, obviously making a different style. So I think time to pour. I have my little tasting glasses here. I'm going to do all 3. If you have those glasses, or please feel free to do them. We start with the Mount Vernon Sauvignon Blanc. First glass. If you don't have the 3, please don't worry, you can do them one at a time. Then the Estate Dry Hills. I'll explain differences in a moment, and I will be referring to the map as well. And then the Reserve Sauvignon Blanc, 2017. I'll explain why there's a different vintage in a moment. So the first 2, the Mount Vernon, this one here, is their entry level. Now, just a little bit of an explanation. When we pose around in the wine trade and do this, why do we do it? When you swill some wine around in a glass like this, what you do is you increase the surface area. So you just get more of the bouquet, more of the smell coming out. So it looks really good and smells really good. So try that with all 3, whatever size of the glass you've got. So the first one is the Mount Vernon. Now, Mount Vernon is their entry level. This is the only wine that they make where they actually bring in some contracted fruit. By that, in the map here, which you may or may not have, you might see if you've looked at it, their vineyard holdings through Marlborough are a patchwork. It's not like one homogeneous mass of Sauvignon Blanc. It's scattered all over the place. Now, this has the benefit for Marcus Wright, who's the winemaker, and Mark Gludman, who's the viticulturist. I'll explain more about the people in a moment as well when we come to that. They have a great choice. They can go through to different plots. Now, the grape they're picking every time is the same, it's Sauvignon Blanc. The region they're in technically is like a loop, is Marlborough, but each one of them is subtly different. So when they harvest them, Marcus Wright ferments them separately in different stainless steel tanks. And then he will make a selection from those, which one he feels are the best, and also stylistically what he considers to suit the Lawson style the best. And of course, what the vintage throws at them and the weather conditions that they're faced with. So, and he's conscious as well of both the Lawson's statement of style, but also what the market likes. And Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc is known for its effusive, zesty, very aromatic, ultra fruity style, which some people, and I have to say here, being a bit sexist, maybe some of the men in the world get a little bit, oh, Sauvignon Blanc. I'm not one of those. You may sound bound to say that. I think that actually the New Zealand style is very positive and it's very pure. And I think it's a world standard bearer. So what they've decided to do to try and develop that is to work on the different sources of them. So if you take the first one, which is the Mount Vernon, they've deliberately made this as the most exuberant tropical fruit style coming through. So if you swill it round and sniff it, you get that real ping pong of exuberant vegetable notes, herbaceous notes, tropical fruits, gooseberry, kicking through, citric fruits as well. It's very exotic, very fruity, very powerful. It is to a degree in your face, deliberately so. It's made to be the most quaffing, straightforward style. As I say, partly from their own estate and partly from contracted fruiting. Now, when we say contracted fruit in the trade, that means they work with growers in other areas where they don't own the vineyards, but they work with them on the growing of the grapes and then commit to buying them to make the fruit. To put this into context, Lawson's, as a producer, makes between 75,000 to 100,000 cases a year, depending on the volume, obviously, of the vintage. That, in New Zealand terms, makes them no more than a medium-sized producer. So they are still on the smaller scale rather than the larger scale, so more artisan than industrial as such. But this is their take on the really nice, easy drinking, accessible, it's Friday, by the way, I'm swallowing, style. I really like it. I think it's not meant to be sophisticated. It's really just a great quaffing wine. Bold citric fruits, no oak at all. It's not that alcoholic, crisp, zesty, and plenty of tropical fruit style to it. And that's, I think, is a really nice entry-level style that they produce, called the Mount Vernon label. When you move on to the second wine, which is the Lawson's White label, which is their estate, so everything's grown from their estate fruit on this one. Marcus Wright, the winemaker, is looking to make a more restrained style. Now, some of you out there might be thinking, okay, the Sauvignon Blanc story, where its origins from, why is its reputation? And it does revert back, of course, to European origins. It's most famously referred back to the Loire Valley in the east side with Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé. And this style that Marcus Wright tries to make is much more of that restrained mineral, lower keys, not quite as exuberant as the Mount Vernon. Works better with food, has more what we call minerality and crispness, but slightly stony, chalky notes. He also, unlike this, which is completely unoaked, the Mount Vernon, he employs about 7% of old barrel wood in this, not to make it oaky, but to give it a bit of texture and a bit of volume to it, and to keep it exuberantly fruity, but also quite restrained, so that if you are a traditional European drinker that likes Sancerre, Pouilly-Fumé, you would find this may be more attractive as a style and a drink than the Mount Vernon, which is more your quaffing, easy drinking style. Now, coming back to a map and the regions, as mentioned earlier, there's about 21 different plot sites that he selects from. And he works very closely with Mark Ludman, who is the vineyard manager. And they harvest Sauvignon Blanc from roughly about 21 different sites, split between the north end, which is the Wairau, Waihopai Central Valleys, and then the Eritrea, Eritrea. They all, the New Zealanders always pronounce it differently to me. I'm not quite sure which ones. Sorry, I thought I saw a question coming in there. First question might have been. No, that's fine. That's a problem. I thought it was a question. So he takes these 21 different sites from these 3 different regions. He ferments them all individually, and then when he's fermented and finished the wine, we'll blend them together and decide what makes the best cuvee or blend for the white label estate wine. So this one here is much more complex. He uses about, as I mentioned, 7% of it is in old barrel fermentation to give it a bit of volume and texture, brings it together so that you have a more serious food-friendly wine as well as something that you can quaff. Now, what I like about Sauvignon Blanc in general, particularly from Marlborough, is it's one of those white wines that transcends between two things. A, you can drink it just as a drink. And so I've been asked about pairing. Good question. Someone had just asked me about what would you pair it with. And I was honestly just about to say this. The first one, Mount Vernon, I think is a quaffing wine. Maybe Canopies, maybe to Nibbles, as you were. This one, the Lawson's Estate, works particularly well with lighter dishes, not unsurprisingly, whitefish, shellfish, crudité, those sort of things. The surprise probably with it is, and it works incredibly well with, if you like it, of course, is goat's cheese. Now that might sound a surprise, but if you're a goat's cheese fan, try this with goat's cheese. It works incredibly well. That is maybe off-piste, but it was a surprise to me. I used to think it didn't work, and it does. And as we're hitting the English asparagus season, it does genuinely work well with the green asparagus. Whether you do it with butter or even hollandaise or just straight, it works really well. Asked by Damien, thank you. I mean, all vines in Marlborough are very young. That's a very good question. Yes, it does, because you're quite right. By definition, nothing's been really planted or grown since '73. So, nothing can be more than about 40 years old, 45 years old. And this has been part of, obviously, the early days development of the region. If you have young vines, they tend to spend, and not unsurprisingly, and I grow for fun vines at home. They spend their whole early days just growing, and all the energy goes into producing leaves and shoots and barks, not so much on fruit. After about 12 or 15 years, all the energy goes into, or more of the energy goes into producing fruit. And if you prune anything, if you prune any plant, you threaten its livelihood. And if you want something to reproduce in the plant world, you threaten it by pruning it, and then it produces flowers and makes fruit. And if it's sort of gone beyond about 12 to 15 years old, the fruit starts to take on real intensity because it's looking actually selfishly to preserve itself and produce seeds. But the byproduct of that is the fruit around it, or the juice around it, that becomes the wine, becomes more and more concentrated. So yes, it takes about 12 to 15 years to start making really good commercial quality wine from the juice of those particular grapes. Once you get beyond 40 or 50 years, which of course they're only just beginning to move into, which in Europe is just the norm, you get seriously good concentration. I think that is the great potential for New Zealand in general, and Marlborough in particular. As these vines get older and older and older, which they are now entering into middle age, we should see the quality of both the fruit and the wine getting even better. So a very good question indeed. Thank you. Yeah, so this, back to English asparagus, it does work incredibly. If you don't like asparagus, obviously don't do it. But general, and shellfish as well in general. Otherwise, good quaffing, nibbles, canopies, that sort of style. Final trio, one of the trio, is the reserve. Now the reserve is the black label. They do all the reserves in the black label. Now reserve is a dangerous wine term in the wine world. Réserve in Europe or French, Riserva in Italian and Spain. In Europe, there tends to be much tougher laws about using it in terms of terminology on a label. It sounds good and it should be good and it should mean something. And in most places it does. And Marcus Wright in Lawson's has always said that he'll only do a reserve when it warrants it. Thank you, Sally. Sally just asked, how long do vines last? I'll come back to that. It's a good question. Vines vary. I want to try not to get too dry here. Some last forever. The oldest vines in the world are in Australia at the moment. There's Shiraz vines in Eden Valley, Barossa there, and are still producing fruit, 180 years old. And I've wandered through Dry Creek in California, Zinfandels, they happily produce to 120. Or Pinot Noirs, more volatile, they tend to fade. They live to about 80, 90 years old. So it depends by different vines genetically live to different ages. Good Sauvignon will live comfortably 70 or 80 years old. And as they get older, they produce less fruit. The fruit's more concentrated. I used to use this excuse at work as I got older to my boss and said, yes, I might be producing less as I get older, but quality is much, much higher, as you probably noted. So it was my excuse of PAYE days. Back to the reserve. As I was saying, Marcus genuinely only produces this when he feels that certain vineyards, above all, stand out. And for example, we're tasting the 2017. You may wonder, we've done two 2019s. He didn't make any in 2018 because he didn't feel the Sauvignon was of the quality 18 to warrant it. Thank you, Tracy. How old are European vine wines? Right, they are usually about the same as mentioned. Sorry, good question, because I mentioned Australia and California. The French call them vieilles vignes, and in general, say take Pinot Noir and Burgundy, which is the main black grape there. Old vines there would be considered to be anything from over 50 years of age. Cabernet Sauvignon in Bordeaux, Syrah in their own, they easily get over 100 years old. Genetically, they just have the makeup to last longer. And as I said earlier, the older they get, the less they produce the energy that goes into those bunches. And the fruit quality they produce is absolutely immense. So you lose on volume and gain on concentration. But yeah, 100, 120. If you have got anything over 50 years old, and is working and operating, producing fruit, you'd be very, very happy in general. The reserve now. Now, what he does with the difference of this is, if you go and smell it and taste it, I hope, as I mentioned earlier, our dear old friends in the Trodal Sauvignons are the same in New Zealand. I hope by now you see that the three are different. And it's not because he's particularly fiddled or faffed around it with it or anything. He's about 20% of this has been barrel fermented, but in old oak casks. Now, if you use old oak casks, you don't get an oaky flavour. You just get a slightly more volume or viscosity coming into the wine and weight, not because you want vanilla oak flavours. But what he's done differently here from the others is in those barrels, he's used wild yeast fermentation. So, and without getting too anarchy about this, when you make most wines, you can inoculate with standard or cultured yeast, so you know exactly how they're going to behave from the family. If you use wild yeast, they are slightly wackier, less predictable from a scientific point of view during the actual alcoholic fermentation process, but they produce lovely smells and flavors. But you don't necessarily want to overdo it. So about 20% of this is wild yeast, as well as a little bit more oak fermentation, and from selected vineyards where he felt the quality of the fruit in 2017 really shone through. So as I mentioned earlier, as he's got all these little site selections, 21 of them, he's smelling, tasting through these tanks and going, you know, that one shows really well. I love the style of that. And he will make a decision about which one will go into different cuvées. Now, as mentioned earlier, and I alluded to, and this is very important, although it's a small time scale for Marlborough, in Lawson's, it's one of the things I admire most about them. The level of experience is incredible. Now, Barbara and Ross founded it, as mentioned, in 1982. Sadly, Ross died of cancer in 2009. Barbara is semi-retired now. She's in her 70s. she acts like as an ambassador for the company. And the three main people that run it, Sean Barnsley, the general manager, who's also a viticulturist with his wife Biddy, Marcus Wright, the winemaker, Mark Gludman, who's the vineyard manager. Between them, they've got 60 years of experience working just at Lawson's, not just in the region. So it's not unsurprising that when they're making decisions about which wine goes into which cuvee, that they find that it's easier to make it because they know the vineyards backwards. They know how they behave. They know how the Sauvignon shows from those particular vineyards. And it makes it, as Marcus says to me, each year is progressively easier to make better decisions as a result of that level of experience. And that you can see when he goes into making something like the Reserve. I get the sort of smells and smells. This might sound a bit pretentious, not meant to be. It's slightly chalky notes that come through, which you don't get in the other two. Slightly sort of ash, chalky notes, mineral notes that come through. It feels weightier, the other two. This one, whereas the Mount Vernon and the Strait Estate, you could drink comfortably as an aperitif, particularly as it's warming up. We've had a very good April. So these have been hit in this warmer month. This one is much more a food wine. And as I mentioned earlier about the question about what you pair it with, we talked about seafood, crudité, light vegetables, salads, and asparagus. This one particularly, I would say, works well with lighter fish dishes. This is really a food wine rather than an aperitif or quaffing wine itself. But in general, just to wind up on this section, 3 Sauvignons. I think they're distinctly different. And this is the same producer. If you try another producer, they'll say theirs are different because of their different vineyards and different nuances. And the thing about as well is within these sites that are in the map we mentioned earlier, the Waira at the top, the Waihopai Central Valleys in the middle, and then over to the Eritrea in the south, the Sauvignons that come from all of those will be distinctly different because of the mineral notes in the north and the cooler notes in the south, and combine the two, and you get a greater effect from blending than if you did them all individually. And that's why I think Sauvignons now from Marlborough are getting more and more sophisticated. And when you have 60 years of experience, I think that really does show through from the people who are producing it. But these are benchmarks for me of the style. As I mentioned earlier, it's not just about Sauvignon Blanc. So we now go on to the next 3. And Pinot Noir is in particular a new and up and coming black grape variety in the region. I think it's essentially the new star coming through from that. Before that, we're going to look at one little in-betweeny I thought might be interesting to try. And this is the Reserve Black Label again, Pinot Gris. So this is going to be a complete contrast to what you just tried with the Sauvignon Blanc. Right, Pinot Gris, what the hell does that mean? Well, Pinot, that name pops up a lot of P's, sorry, in that sentence. But Pinot Gris pops up a lot. And another question, I think, sorry. Or was it a chat? So if I missed that question, I do apologize. Right, so you said that men like Sauvignon Blanc. Is there anything chemically that makes it more like a yes, yeah, the term Marmite, yeah, I understand completely what you're saying. Yes, you know, it's hit or miss, nothing in the middle, love or hate. I don't know what it is. It's very funny at the moment. I don't want to get controversial, but there are definitely in the wine trade certain wines that appeal more to men than women, and I'm not trying to make any judgment when I say that. For example, a lot of middle-aged men really love Rioja. It's very, very strong following for that, and there is a more female bias, for example, towards Sauvignon Blanc in general, irrespective of New Zealand, for female drinkers than male. I'm not quite sure why it is. If you go into other areas like Sancerre, Pouilly-Fumé, and Loire, then it's less so, more traditional, but very hard to actually, frankly, pinpoint it at all. But that indirectly leads on maybe to this one, Pinot Gris, because Pinot Gris is a mutation of Pinot Noir, which we're going to look at in a moment. A long time ago, Pinot Gris evolved out of a mutation from Pinot Noir, so it has a genetic link to Pinot Noir as a grape variety. And the clue is in the name Gris. Gris is the French for grey, and some of you may be familiar with the term Grigio, Italian for grey. It's the same grape, and the reason why it's called a grey Pinot is because it still carries genes in it from Pinot Noir, and it means the grapes, although they're technically white or white wine, produce a coppery color in the skins. And you may have noticed already if you poured this is deeper in color than the Sauvignon Blancs that you just had before. And you get a little bit of this color Pinot Noir heritage in the grape, although it's white coming through. And it makes it this slightly rosé or pinky color. But actually, if you dip the skins in it, make it into a rosé color because it gets so coppery in color when it ripens. This is a real contrast to what we've had before. This is a serious food wine. And when you smell it, it's nowhere near as aromatic as the Sauvignon Blanc you've just had straight away. That's not a bad thing, by the way. Just try it. Straight away, notice it's not as crisp, but it's more viscous, creamier, for want of an expression. Flavors more of orchard fruits, quince, pears, apples. Not as exuberant as, say, Sauvignon Blanc, but for me, it's very textural. Now, when you taste wine, two things you experience, or three things probably experience. First of all, obviously, is the sheer fruitiness and style of it and the crispness of it. So the immediate mouth-watering effect you get, that's caused by the acidity in wine. The fruit flavors you smell or experience. Everybody's individual. If you say it smells of something or tastes of something, please don't feel embarrassed about it or concerned about it. Everybody has a personal perspective on the smell or flavor that is personal to you, and everybody is right to say whether it smells or tastes like that. It's completely subjective, and we're all the same. It's down to you. As it, of course, at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, it's a personal decision. But I would always say I give every wine a chance of it. The other thing is what we call texture. Ponsely, sometimes in the trade, we go mouthfeel. Is it light and easy drinking? Is it creamy and viscous and richer? And this is a good example of a white wine that comes through and it's much, much more creamy, rich and viscous, and therefore is designed deliberately and made deliberately to go with food. So as such, this wine is Marcus's very much food-friendly wine. There's a little bit of barrel fermentation, a little bit of skin contact, and the whole idea is to make one which has subtle fruity flavors, but a lot of what we call body and richness. So you could easily pair this with lighter meat dishes. This actually works if you're a vegan, vegetarian. Works really nicely, for example, with butternut squash, sage risotto. Those sort of dishes really nicely as such. And I just thought it'd be interesting for you to get a new world take on, you're probably all very familiar with Pinot Grigio from Italy, which is light and just a quaffing wine. This is actually quite a richer style and unusual. Maybe you don't drink it all the time, but it's quite a nice, deceptively good style. Then we move on to finish on a pair of Pinot Noirs. Now, Pinot Noir, as mentioned earlier, is the one black grape variety that really comes through well in Marlborough. The area, frankly, isn't warm enough or hot enough consistently to grow and ripen grapes like Syrah, Shiraz, Cabernet Sauvignon. They require much hotter areas than this. But the temperatures are perfect for Pinot Noir because it's a much earlier ripening black grape variety. and much more delicate. And apologies for turning around. We've got two here. We're going to do, this is a pink, yes, dramatically different label. Yes, Marmite moment again, Damien, I think whether you like it or not. And then Reserve Pinot Noir. So this is the star black grape that's grown in the region. And we'll start with the rosé, obviously, because the lighter of the two. So pour this away. And then we'll look at the Pinot Noir red proper in a moment. Now, when you make a rosé, if you squeeze the grapes, the juice out of a wine grape, the juice that runs out is water wide. All the colour is contained in the skin. If you want to make a red wine or a rosé wine, by definition, you have to immerse the skins with the juice when it's fermenting. My analogy is like making a pot of tea. So you pour the water in, you put the leaves in or the tea bag, and it gradually infuses the colour, gradually infuses the flavours into it. And the longer you leave it in contact, the deeper and darker, and to use the same parallel with tea, the more tannic it becomes, and the richer and stronger and drier it becomes. This has only been in contact with the skins and the juice for about 6 or 8 hours. So just enough to give it this really light, delicate pink hue. And then they would have drawn the juice away from the skins, taken the skins away and discarded them, not wasted them. I'll just touch on that in a moment. And then they can continue to ferment the juice out as a wine like this, but by then it's stained into this very attractive pink color. And the objective of all these as well is, of course, is to get the really bright, vibrant, fruity flavors that come through. So it's a Pinot Noir, comes from a single block, it's shaded in the northeast corner of your map, Chaters Road. It's premeditated. And the question that Damon asked earlier about younger vines, the vines here are only 12 to 15 years old, and therefore they are in a better state when they're younger. They're actually paradoxically better to make a rosé Pinot than to try and make a red Pinot. Another 10 years from now, that block will probably be used to make a red Pinot. At the moment, it works really well to make a rosé Pinot, if you sort of get the connotation of it. I really love the strawberry smell, and it's like crushed little herbal strawberries, those little alpine mini ones. Oh, it's delicate. This is a dry rosé. I know there's quite a few rosé on the market. It has some residual sugar. This doesn't. It's crisp, but it's really subtly fruit. It's like English summer pudding fruits. If you make an English summer pudding and that lovely juice that runs out, I think it's just sort of the parallel to that sort of flavors. And obviously, with summer coming along, better weather, I think it works really well as a style. Maybe not tonight, it's a little bit grey, a little bit damp today, but it's, you know, you can imagine it working on, you know, sitting on your patio, nice hot day, lighter foods, salads, or just as a general drink. I think Pinot Noir in particular makes a wonderful rosé as well as a serious red wine. It's a new style. They decided to go slightly off-piste with this packaging. I quite like. I've grown to like it. I wasn't sure, if I'm honest, when I first saw it, but it's meant to express a sort of more relaxed, ethereal style of drinking, but there's no less of concentration gone into the winemaking just because of the more relaxed packaging of it and so on. But I thought it was time to taste a rosé with the summer coming on. Right, and then finish with the Pinot Noir. So this is the Reserve. So this is the Pinot Noir Reserve. They do a straight white label Pinot, but Wine Trust I preferred the Reserve, so I've gone with that as such. And Pinot Noir is the great black grape of Burgundy, as you probably well know. Makes all the famous names in Burgundy and works particularly like in Burgundy with a warm but not ultra warm climate. So it makes a much more delicate style of red. It's not the most tannic grape variety. It's not the fullest or most full-bodied. By that, if you're a Shiraz, Syrah, Cabernet drinker, for example, that they are much more tannic, much more full-bodied. Pinot Noir genetically just is not like that. It's meant to be a much more ethereal, delicate, not lacking in substance, I must stress, style. I love it. It's probably, along with Nebbiolo in Italy, probably my most favorite grape on the planet in general. And New Zealand, of all New World countries, has adopted it and adapted it the best, in my opinion. I think there's some crackers in California, but at a price. I think for value for money, what's coming out in New Zealand is absolutely fantastic. And Marlborough, although obviously mentioned earlier, very much dominated by Sauvignon Blanc. The second most important grape variety, and increasing plantations coming through, is Pinot Noir. So if you smell it, you should get, they also say forest fruits. That's a mixture of, it's hard to interpret that, but red and blackberries. I guess we'll get cherry notes, a little bit of cinnamon, ground cinnamon spice. You may have noticed we've got a white background tip again. It's not the deepest color. That's normal. Nothing to worry about. There are some certain red, black varieties. They always have a paler color than others. That's quite normal. I think it's actually quite alluring. It's quite delicate. Have you noticed the tannins? Tannins are about give you that drying effect in your mouth. This is quite delicate. It's not too astringent. Nicely grippy, but just mellow and quite easy to drink as a style. You'll notice it's quite crisp. You can get crispness in red wine as well. The acidity level is important. And I love that fruit intensity. And above all, it feels relaxed, easy drinking, savory, works beautifully with lighter meat dishes, duck and lamb as well in particular. Again, vegan, vegetarian thinking. It works wonderfully with a wild mushroom risotto. So if you're into that sort of style, we've done this and we love mushroom risotto, and we often use this as a pairing. Sorry, I'm probably behind in questions. Can I take, just running through here, kind of differentiation from Provence Rosé from Helen. Can I taste vanilla from Ben? And what temperature should you serve Pinot? And yes, Damon, it does go very well with curry, Pinot Gris, going back to your apologies, catching up on questions here. Provence Rosé. Provence Rosé is a benchmark style, off very pale. The interesting thing is that Marcus Wright, the winemaker, I'm looking serious now and I can read the questions, he actually imported the yeast Provence producer to make that rosé because he thought the yeast influence and it was important. And I would say the Provence Rosé, how does it differentiate? The Provence Rosé maybe with a little bit more, have a slightly higher acidity and might even be slightly paler, Helen, than the one that you've had as before. But he has tried still to model it. And it is a different grape variety. The main grape variety that's used in Provence is Grenache. So that grape variety will give a different flavor profile as well. But they've gone with Pinot Noir. But I do think there is enough similarity there, but the differentiations maybe hopefully is of interest rather than conflict. Ben, yes, vanilla. I was just actually about to say, vanilla is a byproduct of oak fermentation. When you age any wine in oak, fermented or aged in oak, you get vanilla because there's a chemical. Vanilla, as you think of the sort of Madagascar vanilla pods. The key ester flavor you're tasting there is called vanillin, hence the term vanilla. And paradoxically, oak, within its grains, has the same chemical, vanillin. So you get vanilla. So it's not word association football. It is actually a direct correlation between what you taste would reflect from vanilla you had in the panna cotta or vanilla ice cream. It's directly the same chemical that you're tasting. So you're quite right. There is a touch of vanilla there, but they try not to over oak it. It's about 25% new wood. So the more new wood you use, the stronger the oaky or vanilla note that you would pick up. Sally, temperatures, you could serve this at, good question, you could serve this cool in the summer. If the ambient temperature is high, think of cooling everything down. If it's the winter, you think the other way around. Don't put red wine on the radiator though, it doesn't work. But room temperature in the winter is different from room temperature in the summer. And therefore this wine definitely, I'd have 20 minutes in the fridge. It just lifts the fruitiness, lifts the aromatics. It's more refreshing when you drink it if you're sitting in 25, 28 degrees outside. Thank you, Damien, again. Yeah, again, and the rosé, again, I would serve, yeah, I'll shut about the rosé, I promise you. Yeah, serve that chilled as well. So have I missed anything else? How come, yes, thank you, Tracy. How come you keep Sauvignon full? I love that, not in this. Yes, very difficult. No, they're meant, good question again. Sorry, that's not a cliche, I keep saying. They're made to be drunk, frankly, within 3 to 4 years. Drink them straight away and keep them through. They're nothing, it's not like the crusty, don't shove them in the cellar, forget them 20 years. They're designed to be exuberant, friendly, fruity, upfront. But don't worry if you have one that you hangs around for a couple of years, it'll still be good. So, but don't think don't do it for an anniversary or special occasion like that. As such, have I missed any? Interest of time. Lychees, yes. Lychees, I normally observe, that's a good question. I normally observe that with Gewürztraminer. And our Lawsons do make a bloody good Gewürztraminer, I tell you, and it is pure lychees, but we're not tasting it tonight. But that I do associate that more with that. Goat's, great. Goat's cheese fan, do try it with Sauvignon. Honestly, I'm not geeky and weird. It really does work incredibly well, particularly the crumbly, softer one. I mean, not the harder, sort of more savoury styles as such. So do try it. You will be very surprised. If you don't like goat's cheese, obviously, it's no brainer, don't touch it. Yeah, gentle curry, definitely. Pinot, yeah, I'd say the warmer the weather, so the Pinot at just 20 minutes in the fridge works beautifully. What other wines do Lawsons do? They do a Riesling, which Wine Trust are about to list. Do try that. It really is. It's lovely, lime, zesty, great with Thai cooking. So we nearly put that on tonight as a thought, but that's coming onto the list very soon. Once open, how long will white wines last? Right, thank you. Right on cue. If you finish, I don't know if you've got these. These are really good. This is the old Vacuvans. Just shove it in there. Do that. And then you just Vacuvans it out, and then that will last you a couple of days comfortably. I mean, conscious tonight, very much that, we're maybe opening a lot of bottles. If you've got a Vacuvan system, if you haven't, put the screw cap back on. Ross will be proud of you to celebrate his work he did with that. And it'll last certainly till tomorrow night, possibly to lunchtime beyond, possibly to night beyond. So 2 to 3 days without it, the fruit will start to fade a little bit. But if you've got one of these are terrific. You can get them easily, all of them from Amazon at the moment. Obviously, with being locked down, we're not allowed to go shopping. You can preserve for 2 to 3 days comfortably in that as such. So just looking through the notes, I don't know if I've missed anything. Are there any more questions before we get towards the? Have another look at. You said, may have touched on this. Oh, that's an earlier question. That was, I think I've answered that. What, yeah, relative prices, yes. From Damien. Yes, well, if you go onto the website, obviously you'll see the prices. Pinot Noir tends to be the most expensive. One of the reasons for that is they have to crop it to get the concentration. They have to crop it much lower. By that, the volume of bunches of grapes that you get on the plant are lower than with Sauvignon Blanc, for example, without lack of concentration. It's part of, without getting too geeky again, it's part of making good Pinot. You have to be ruthless, and What that means in the summer is they literally go around and they chop bunches off when they're green, because black grapes at that stage are green, and they've not turned black yet, and they get rid of them so that the energy of the vine goes into fewer bunches, but obviously they lose volume. And you have to do that with Pinot Noir genetically than with others. So you can crop Sauvignon Blanc at maybe 20% higher level than Pinot Noir on the same plot to get the same level of concentration. So therefore, pro rata, the cost therefore goes up in producing Pinot Noir, I'm afraid, because of the volume to the area that you produce. How exactly how do your favorite Pinot Noirs, other than Lawson? Well, I'm probably bound to say this, being a bit of an old fart, is I do really like Burgundy. Burgundy is the spiritual home of Pinot Noir. I mentioned California earlier. California makes fantastic styles as well, but very expensive, the hot ones. Red Burgundies in particular are fantastic, but these days I'm afraid the prices of the really top ones are getting, I mean, really steep as such. But yes, if for a treat, go for it. Thank you, Jude. When's your next webinar? Oh, that we'll see. Depends on the clapometer tonight for this one, but I hope to be back and we can do other areas and other things you may be interested in. Please do let us, you know, do let us know what you might be interested in. We can always come back and pick anything off the Wine Trust list as well to have a go at as well. What is your favourite English sparkler? Gusbourne. Gusbourne, to me, are the best of all. So I think they make fabulous. We are getting towards the end of the time. Can you do a Chablis night? I love Chablis. I'd be very happy to do a Chablis night. I've had as much fun in Chablis, obviously drinking Chablis, and it's great because you can go around all the producers in Chablis very easily. It's a little town, even smaller than Blenheim, so you can get around very easily. I'd be very happy to do a Chablis night. I'm a wife book, which is one of her favourites, so she would struggle to support that, obviously with tasting as well. Don't worry if you're a bit tipsy. I think we're all a bit. Nye Timber, I think Nye Timber is fantastic. It's got very expensive recently. I do respect Canadian one winemaker there. She's fantastic. I think the wines are superb. So I do rate them as high, very well as Gusbourne. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your good. We're getting towards it. As we get towards it, I'll keep taking questions, but can I take this opportunity to say thank you very much for taking it. I know it's all, isn't it, really funny? Lockdown and more and more at home, and we're sort of readjusting to everything. So it's great doing this. I'm obviously probably getting used to Zoom and all the technology like everybody. But thank you so much for taking the time out to join it. I do hope you've enjoyed the wines. As ever, you will have probably liked some more than others. That's normal when we do tastings. Do think about the food and wine pairings I mentioned as well. Sometimes you can taste a wine on its own and be you know, it's okay. You have it with the right food and you think actually it's a lot better. Do please think about that. You're not one of these do invest in those, then you can have lots of bottles. Being in the trade, I have about, not these days because of lockdown, they often have 10 or 15 bottles on the go at any time. All tasting, not drinking. Not as good as all, right, see the question. Thank you very much. I think I'm sorry, I do mean it. If you have missed a question and you really, please do send it into the Wine Trust office. I will get back to you outside of this session if I've missed anything, because it goes zip in a minute, because we're getting towards almost out. But please, thank you very much. Have a very good weekend. And I hope to see you again. Well, I can see you, obviously, but I hope you can see me and we can see each other again with another tasting sometime. Very happy for you to do send your suggestions in of what you would like, if you think it's worthwhile. And if I think I know something about it, I'll be happy to come back and have a go. But thank you again. Have a good weekend. And keep going with lockdown. It will end. Promise. Then we might do a tasting in person sometime. Bye. Thank you.